You play fantasy foot? Do you play fantasy football at all?
No, I stopped doing that because I started cheering for other teams. I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't do this.
My guys at work, it's pretty
hurts.
funny because now they're like picking the Vikings defense and stuff. And
You gotta pick the Vikings defense. Plus 12 in turnover ratio or something. Yep.
yeah, it's crazy.
As soon as that ends, yeah, you'll see.
Yeah.
Bradford will get hurt.
Well, Bradford wasn't great, but I don't know. They're doing okay.
He doesn't have to be great with that defense.
No, he doesn't. It's kind of like the Peyton Manning Broncos from last
He's
year.
way better than that.
They scored 3 offensive touchdowns.
They did, yeah, they did. So that's way above what they normally.
Defense only made it a little easy to do.
Yeah. All right. So tonight we're going to do a new project. We are going to cover some more controls, some new controls. We're going to do some enums, some enumerations, which is a pretty important concept in Swift. And we're going to be doing this all in Swift 3. So could be a little bit of a challenge for me too, but we'll work our way through it.
He's on 7.3.12, so these computers didn't get updated yet. So it's cheap.
I thought you guys went and did a few extras like last week or whatever. When you were like going through. No. All right. That'll make it more of a challenge. Okay. So most of the syntax will be the same. Just trying to think if there's anything that's majorly different. It should be pretty much the same. I'll ask Brent if he can go ahead and take some time and update the ones that haven't been, because he said he would do it if we need him to. So.
Well, I talked to Steve and I thought he was going to do those because I told him those 2 machines, that one.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Done, right?
Yeah, he did his last week in class.
Yeah. So I don't know why he didn't.
That was awesome.
But I'll jump in again tomorrow morning.
Yeah, that's what I thought was the deal. So I can ask Brent to do it too to any of the computers that haven't been updated, so that there are, because otherwise it's going to be hard to try and match code at some point. Right now, I think looking through what I want to cover, I think we're pretty much okay. There's one thing that I know is going to be different, but we'll get through it. All right. So anyway. Go ahead and start up Xcode. Check the version number that you have when it starts up. If it's not 8, it should at least be 7.3.1. How many people are updated to 8? You 2, 3.
This half group, the good half.
Yeah. You can see which side of the room is solid.
Well, at the end of class, if you update yours and leave it on, it should update. Leave the screensaver
Yeah,
off.
just leave it on.
Make sure you turn the screensaver off and the screen protector saying so it doesn't go into lock mode saying to sign back in. And it should run. I think these computers shut off at the end of the night, I would imagine.
There's however long they go into sleep mode, yeah. And then Isaiah, how long you did yours in class, right?
I did mine during the day and
How did you get to download it?
took like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I was apparently updating while I was.
He was using it yesterday. I don't know how he pulled that off. That was pretty sweet though.
That side of the room is the overachievers. So. Oh, we have 2 Viking fans on that side. Is that right?
For sure.
2.5. Like Kristen, you're kind of like on the fence.
Oh no.
No.
I can't say I'm a Viking fan at all.
To that
I'm not really a football fan,
How was your trip?
right? But I got Packers. My parents are Packers, and my fiance is a Dolphin fan. So.
Oh wow,
He's
that's
from Florida, though.
that's interesting.
So
Where-
he's like diehard.
Where from in Florida?
Voices.
D-Land, you know where that is? That's where he was born.
Uh-uh.
Crescent City. It's not too far from Orlando, like an hour.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Nice.
I'll just remember
Dolphins. Yeah, that's okay. We'll be patient.
All Dolphin
So I
fans
can
have to be
continue with that
diehard
for the
Dolphin
sheet.
fans
That's
because
great.
they're not really great.
They, it's funny because when I was a little kid, they were phenomenal, and then they just took a dive and never recovered.
I looked at a power ranking today that said the Dolphins were second to last.
I think the Bears were third to last, but then they beat the Lions.
Yeah, Cleveland is last.
Cleveland will always be. I was listening. They're like, yeah, Cleveland's ranked number 33 or 34.
It's,
There's only 32
there's only
teams.
32 teams.
I know that was the point. They're like, they're that bad. They cannot be 32.
Oh
They're
man,
33 or 34.
that's harsh.
So true.
All right, well, yeah, you may have to migrate over to that side at some point, Kristen. Let the accelerated side, do their thing.
It's downloading. It
I'll
takes an
just
hour and 19
play
minutes.
neutral over here.
Okay, so we'll create a new Xcode project tonight. You can just click on that. And now for 731 or 732, this will look different, but you want to select, in either case, you want to select iOS, and then you want to select a single view.
And I swear it wasn't there.
Well, it's like the mystery setup user. I don't know. Apple's just having fun with people now. They're just having random code that they run every now and then. Oh, let's just remove this and add this. They do whatever they want because they're Apple. Okay, so single view, then you click on next, product name. So we'll call this guy drop ball. Team, we'll see if it'll not blow up, and it didn't. Yay. Language Swift, devices iPhone. We're not going to use core data.
We
I
should
mean-
use the mid-state one.
Yep, if possible. If you get an error, just use none. But I think if possible, try to use the mid-state one.
Mine didn't pop up a team.
You don't have a team option at all.
You didn't see.
That's probably a benefit of updating your computer. I seriously, I honestly
Is it
think.
on there?
No, oh, our side has no team. We are all solo players. We're NASCAR over here.
Again, it seems to be a difference in the level of
We just picked
the sides here. But anyway, as long as we can deploy it to a simulator, that's all it's going to matter. If you guys have a problem with that, if it won't let you run it in a simulator, then we'll have to fix it. But for now, if you have the mid-state team available, go ahead and pick it, and then go next, and put that on your flash drive or wherever you guys are keeping them, and create. All right, so in Xcode 8 now, this is different. So the team name and all this good stuff used to be up on the top. Now it's in the middle part.
Oh, there's where we can select team.
So do you have the option now? Okay. Yeah, I think it is different in 7.3.
We are a team.
All right, you
We're
guys,
late drafters. They're like first rounds through 1, 3, we're 4 through 6.
you guys, yeah, you guys are the second stringers. That's all right. So I'm just kidding. Just having a little fun there. Viking fans got to get in our jabs when we can. It's not often we get that opportunity.
You realize karma. That's why I haven't said too much.
Yeah, I know. All right, so this is a single view app. Go ahead and select a simulator. I'm going to select a 5S and then try and run it. This at least starts up the simulator, so it goes through all the gyrations of having to start up that framework, which takes a while. So it's good to get that going right away, so it's up and running when you add your code changes.
So you just click on it and it's supposed to generate automatically, or?
Yep, if you click on the run button, that will build it, and then it will start up the simulator. If you have the older version of Xcode, it'll probably say iOS 9.3 or something like that in your title. It takes a while.
I think that they need to replace that computer
I have they?
One day Brent couldn't use the microphone because it was like reading the speakers for the microphone or something. And then today even he had to unplug them because it was reading as something else too. The camera.
I think Brent is pretty determined to replace these with PCs.
Oh God, yes.
Which, you know, yeah, I can understand that. We're talking about doing Xamarin possibly for mobile application development, in which case, yeah, you don't need the Macs anymore. They got a new chair. This thing's kind of nice. I mean, computer sucks, but the chair's okay. Chair's not bad. All right, well that thing's loading up. It's not going to do much, just be a white screen. But so tonight, what we're going to do is back when we were working with playgrounds, back in the good old days, we played around with a little bit of UI stuff where we created these little round views and we filled them in and we were dropping those, having them kind of fall on the screen. So I'm going to do an implementation of that. We're going to do that tonight. That's why the name Drop the Ball. It had nothing to do with football really, but what we're going to do is we're going to create an app that uses a segmented control and a slider control, and we're going to regulate the amount of animations that are being produced per second and then the color of the animations, and then that will dynamically update the user interface on the fly. So we're going to use those controls to do that. If this ever actually gets going. Anyone have an iPhone 7?
Who has an iPhone in this class? I'd like to know that. Oh, okay. I'm not the only one who doesn't have an iPhone.
Good student.
My
We
sister
don't
is
even
like
have
diehard.
iOS. I don't have an Apple computer, a Mac computer at home. I don't have an iPhone. Why am I in this class?
The developers I work with, the developers I work with at Foot Locker, the lead iOS developer now that I'm no longer full time there, he's an iOS developer and he has an Android phone, so he doesn't even have an iPhone.
Good for him.
Yeah, it has something to do with cost. You know, they're pricey.
That's why I don't go iOS. You have to pay for everything.
Yep, you do. The accessories and the whole shebang, they charge you for everything. All right, so if you go on the storyboard file, this guy here, I'm going to bump this down a little bit so there we go. What we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to work with a couple of new controls here. So the first one is the slider control, this guy here. So if you click on it, it says displays a horizontal bar called a track that represents a range of values. So this is a continuous range of values. I believe they're floats. The number is a float type, so it's decimal based. So I'm going to drop this guy right around the middle of the screen-ish and size it up a little bit. So we'll use this to represent the number of balls or animated objects that we are dropping per second. So I'm going to go ahead and center it too. Once it's on there, use the control click drag down technique and then center it horizontally. And that's probably about big enough. Then what we should probably do for user benefit is put labels, because this guy, oddly enough, doesn't come with labels built in. Oops, I didn't want to do that. So we can add labels to the max to represent the max and min values. So I'll put one over here, and then recalling that there's a little trick. You can press the Alt key and click and drag, and that'll duplicate an object. So I can put a label on each end. On the one end, we'll make the minimum value 0. And on the other end, we'll say 10. And try to line that up. There we go.
I'm not sure.
so if we click on the slider control, and then here you can see the like attributes of it. So it gives you like a default value, minimum, maximum. So right now it's set to have a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 1. And it's centered in the middle, so it's at 0.5. I'm going to change the value. So that's going to be what the value of the slider is when you start off. I'm going to set it so it's minimized. So right to start with, you're not going to have any balls. Yeah.
I can't tell you what the computer just did.
Are you back to setup user?
No, but my whole the whole storyboard.
Yeah.
Doesn't have anything on. Like the view controller scene. That's gone.
This doesn't exist?
No.
Oh, wow.
It was like it was working and I hit a button. I don't even know which one, like J or H or something to try to type, and it went all the way.
Yeah, but it's like it's there, but there's nothing.
Yeah, it's interesting. So what is the P to bring it all back?
Undo.
Yeah, try Control Z or Command Z, sorry. No dice on.
What if you click off the main storyboard?
I tried clicking this and it locked up. So
It locked up.
yeah, for like a couple seconds there.
Nice.
I have to.
Go over here once and then change your. Doesn't have any information, nothing. So it's totally.
It's like gone.
Okay, so go ahead and do this. Try this once. Don't just stop clicking. Stop clicking. click on the folder.
This one.
No, not that one. The folder at the top. Yeah, that guy. All right. Hit the storyboard and delete it.
Delete the start.
Delete the whole thing and just whack it.
Delete.
No, like
Yeah, just
the
move the trash.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, all right.
toolbar that comes up on the
And
top.
now you got that, which is interesting.
How about we just start the project over?
Yeah, I think you may have to. I was going to have you add a storyboard manually, but there's some weirdness there.
I was like, what happened to those?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm
just-
installing in the
Window
back.
and
I'm,
see.
I'm actually downloading but not installing. So
Okay. Yeah, just do it again. You can call your drop the ball too if you want or something.
I don't know. We just need to start setting those up.
That's pretty amazing, actually. I've never seen that.
I don't know what the hell to do with that.
Do you know why this is so wide?
Yeah, you just have to set your metrics.
Okay.
Right there, change that to like 4-inch.
Yeah, that was.
There.
That's not good.
No, you just gotta center it.
That must be 7.
It's
So you get your stuff back. I would just go ahead and size it right away like and hopefully you're good to go. You gotta click on something over there. There you go.
Okay, so I had this before.
I had a label here,
Well, see,
I remember this computer's possessed.
What you may have to do in your case, Nate, is size it back up to a full size. I think your label is off the screen because it was way over on the right. Just drag it back into the storyboard. And
thank you.
yeah.
Give me 2 seconds to get the label back, and I apologize.
Well, we're off to a good start.
So weird.
Oh, how I love learning on the fly.
So click on that.
changing the what?
The name,
Like the name of the window?
the name of like the project or the solution.
I really wish I knew what I clicked, so I never do it again.
Yeah, that's really bizarre.
Okay, so now I've got it centered. I've got it 0 to 10.
Yeah, so the value we set to 0, minimum 0, maximum should be 10. So this is with the slider itself selected.
Okay.
Maximum value should be 10.
Yep.
All right, so that's good. All right, so next thing we're going to do, we have that slider on there. So this guy's going to be what we're going to use to adjust the number of animations we're making. So let's go into our view controller Swift file. Hopefully everyone has one. It doesn't disappear, it doesn't go away or anything like that.
I don't like you getting involved with that.
You got the spinning wheel,
Yeah.
the wheel of misfortune.
Very much so. It's thinking. Okay, now it's gone. Stay away.
Actually, now that we did that, sorry about that. Another couple minutes here. Let's go back into the main storyboard. Right away, I'm going to put this segmented control on here. So the segmented control, for the iPhone user we have, you've probably seen these. These are, you have like a series of like segments that allow you to select from different options. These are real common now on iPhones. This is a relatively new control. You drag one of these guys over, drop it on here, and then you can size this up as well. It defaults to this first and second like this. And what I'm going to do is select it, and so we have right now there's 2 segments. I'm going to bump this up like over here in the with the attribute inspector, attribute assistance, yeah, the attribute inspector selected. This shows you the number of segments that you have, the name of the segment, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to bump this guy up to 5. So I'll have 5 total segments. You may have to size this up a little bit. And these are going to be colors. So we're going to use this to select the colors. So as you tap on these, it changes the selected value, and then we'll use that to change the color of our objects. All right, so with the first one selected, we're going to change that title from first to red. And then so you have to change over here where it says segment, if you change it to 1, and then change the name from second to green. And no, the third one I'm not going to change to yellow. I'm not going to put green and yellow side by side. So the third one can be blue.
I was hoping for.
Yeah, we'll get an orange in there yet. Segment 3. Oh, segment 2 did not. That should be blue. There.
If you don't enter off of it,
It doesn't take.
accept it.
Yeah. Purple for segment 3, actually segment 4. And then the final one, we'll make orange.
Halloween's coming.
Exactly. All right, so now we have our colors defined. If you want, you can go ahead and rerun it too right away. Make sure everything looks okay. We may have to like adjust locations and stuff on it.
See, I figured you said drop the ball. I thought maybe it was a New Year's app.
I don't think you guys want to be here on New Year's. But we could do that. We could have seasonally themed apps. And my slider's not even on the screen. It's up here at the very tippy top. And this guy's saying, so if you have iOS 7 or Xcode 7 rather, it probably is looking more or less okay. If you have Xcode 8, it's probably looking something like mine. So what I need to do then, have this centered. Also have to center this guy right away. So with the segmented control, you can do the control drag and center that as well. And then I'm going to have to bring that down from the nether regions up there. So this will have to have a constraint, a vertical constraint applied to it. So if I do the control drag, I'll go down with it. Actually, I'm going to go, I don't know where I'm going to go. I'm just going to spin around and have fun with it. All right, I'll go up and go vertical spacing to layout guide. And I'm going to set that at around, oh, let's go with like about 250 maybe. And then that's probably going to whack these guys, these labels, but we'll see. They've made this whole thing kind of a guessing game now with these constraints. But anyway, that should, we may have to also set a constraint on our segmented control, but we'll see what happens here. If you're on Xcode 7, you probably don't have to worry. It's probably already pretty close. Progress. All right, so my slider is there, although I don't see the actual slider, but slider is kind of there, and my segmented control is up at the top, so I'm going to have to move it down. It's kind of weird that I'm going to change the value on my slider. It's kind of weird that it's not showing up.
Don't you have to do this constraints left and right too in the thing?
Of the slider?
Yeah, don't you remember with Xcode 8 you guys said all the weird.
Yeah, it might be a size issue. Yeah, it's a good point. Let's try that. I'm going to try to set the width. And
There was a way to set the distance from the edges too, wasn't there?
yeah. It's centered horizontally, so that should take care of that, but I think I need a width constraint on it, which I set to 230. But usually when you set a width constraint, you also have to set a height constraint. So I'm going to do that right away. And the height constraint is 30, so that should be enough for that. But I also need to set a constraint on my segmented control. I'm going to do the segmented control to the bottom.
If I got it to lay out fine without constraints, should I?
By all means, just do what you have then. Don't put the constraints are a headache, but with Xcode 8, lots of times it kind of forces you to have them.
I'm trying to find constraints.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and run them with those added and see what that does.
Open it, so kind of straight down. Release. Do some of that stuff. Set horizontal, center. That's how you do
All right,
it.
looks like it's a little closer to what I wanted.
So how do you get the actual slider to somewhere?
I had to set a width constraint on it, so if you select it and then just do control and drag inside of it, and then select width and then set it to like, mine was set to like 230 if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 230. And then when you set a width constraint, sometimes then you have no height, so I set a height constraint as well, and that was 30. So 230 and 30 works pretty good on an iPhone 5, which means it'll also be okay in an iPhone 6. This guy is pretty close. I don't know how much I want to mess with it, but these guys I'm going to want to put above the slider, which is only going to cause me grief probably, but I'm going to do it. Just going to do it anyway. All right, so with these, with my labels, I'm going to set a, if this doesn't work, I'm just going back and delete this constraint, but I'm going to set a vertical constraint. It's so tiny that I can't get a hold of it. Nope. Vertical spacing, and the vertical spacing is going to be really, really tiny. I'll go about 10. And I'm going to do the vertical spacing on this guy. And that one's not even visible. Let's see. Constraints. I don't think that one took.
How are you getting it to bring up just vertical spacing and not vertical spacing from top or bottom?
I do a control drag down. If you do a control drag up, it'll go to the, it tries to pin it to whatever you're dragging to.
Right. really was just
Do it
trying
right
to
to the bar.
Yeah, I do right to that slider. Because I'm trying to space it off of the slider is what I'm trying to do. So whatever you drag to, whatever control, whether it's an edge or it's another control, that's what it'll try to set the constraint to.
And would you put it like 10?
Yeah. Yeah, set to 10. That's probably gonna whack everything now. Yeah, it did. And the reason why is because I got a vertical constraint but no horizontal constraint. So these guys are so fun. All right, I'm going to go ahead and remove that constraint rather than mess with it. I'm just going to remove the constraint. So I think if I do a Command Z, that should remove them.
It's not.
Probably a dumb question to ask, but this would be recorded for YouTube.
Yep, I'm recording it right now. So my 10 is okay, my 0 is not. Kind of acted like it didn't remove the constraint on that one. Yeah, I'm just gonna, okay, so that's there. Yep, I'm gonna delete that.
It's not the easiest, is it?
It's hard to get these constraints right. You know, I really regret that they enforce these constraints so seriously now in Xcode 8. It's like, it was a convenience in Xcode 7 and Xcode 8. It's just a major pain. All right. I'm just going to move it over manually and call it good. So we have, I'll have to move it probably, yeah, move it over, move it down a little. All right. And then we'll just leave it there. So as long as yours is pretty close, we'll call that good. We're going to put a label at the top too for our handy little app that we're making here. I'm going to drag a label up here towards the top and call this guy the actual app name. And this will definitely have to be centered. And if you are doing this in Xcode 7, it might not be bad to set these constraints anyway, because when you update to Xcode 8, you're going to need them. So I'm going to center that guy horizontally and also vertically. And with the vertical spacing, I'm going to set that to like 30. All right, and then we might be actually done. One thing I am going to do is I'm going to change the font on this guy so it looks so it's a little bit bigger and bolder since it's like the app title.
What does highlighted mean?
That it's actually like highlighted when you start the app up, so it's like selected.
Oh, okay.
Slide is right on the same control. Like this.
Yeah, that's good enough. Centered. We'll call it a day. All right. As long as it's visible.
Why put that? I got that space.
It's like, I don't know what they're thinking. Oh, they must want it way over here, about 10 feet to the right. That's what they want.
Why does 010 keep showing up below my stuff?
Yeah, I know. It's such a fun little thing they did. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to need some variables to contain the parameters that we're going to be tracking. So first one, these are going to be vars in each case because they're going to be mutable. Will be the current value. This guy will be a float with an exclamation point, which says, yes, we promise sincerely that we're going to have a value for it at runtime. And then a selected color, which is a UI color type. Both those guys should be right at the top of the class file underneath the class declaration.
So what does a float mean?
A float is a decimal point value, so it's going to be like number, dot, number, whatever. So it's not a integer value. And I don't know why the reason why it's a float is because the slider uses a float type, which is kind of a really old-fashioned type. But I suppose the control has been around a long time, since the Objective-C days way back, and so they probably didn't want to change the type on it. I don't know why they changed everything else, but next we'll need a timer object. This one we better make will make a question mark, because we may, the user may or may not decide to increase the value of their slider. So that's an optional. Doesn't have to have a value at runtime.
My class view controller has no initializers.
You either are missing one of these exclamation points or a question mark. If you have just like UI color with nothing after it, or that with nothing after it, it'll make you create an initializer.
Use of undeclared type timer. So those you both have that.
Okay,
That's a
because
syntax thing.
you're on
Have one
Xcode.
too?
I think so.
You're on Xcode 7. Change it from timer to be NS timer. For anyone on Xcode 8, just use a timer. If you're on Xcode 7 dot whatever, use NS timer. So that's one difference. So when you update to 8, this will have to become one of these guys. Well, I think it'll give me a warning. Yeah, it gives me an error. Yeah, so I have to replace that with a timer. I don't have a choice anymore. An NS timer is an Objective-C type. All right, so the timer is going to be used. A timer, all it does is it has like a sequence that counts off a certain value. Like you set an interval on the timer that could be, it's measured in seconds. So as we change the value of the number of balls we're going to create in the app, this timer value will have to be changed. And this timer will fire at an interval that we specify. And then when it fires, every time it does, that's when we're going to create an object and display it on the screen. All right, so a timer provides like a multi-threaded capability to the app. Then another variable we're going to want is this guy called current X, I'm calling it. And current X, I think, is going to be a float as well. So what this is going to be is as these objects get dropped, so they don't just like all land on each other, we're going to move across the screen. Actually, let's just do this. We'll let the compiler decide what to make this. We'll start off like that. There. So we have our variables. Current value is just the current value of the slider that we're gonna store. We could also check it every single time, but that's kind of a waste when we can just like store it off. Selected color is going to be the color that they pick in the segmented control, and we're going to manage that through an enumerated type, and then the timer is what we're going to use for firing off our little function that we're going to use to drop balls, and that's it. All right, so now the next thing we're going to need is a means of determining what color to create. We could just use numbers, like these segmented controls that we have. These guys have an index on them, so like red is 0, green's 1, blue's 2, purple 3, and so forth. So we could use a straight index value, but for readability it's much better to actually have like some sort of descriptive value associated with it. So you're not just saying you have like a switch statement that says case 0, case 1, that sort of thing. We actually will have like an enumeration that will be a lot more user readable. So in our source file, I don't think we covered enums too much. We went over them briefly when we were doing the playground thing, but enums are kind of handy things that you can use to make code a lot more readable. Have you guys covered enumerated types at all in class? Okay, good. All right, so C# has them, so does Swift. Most languages do. In Swift, it's just called enum, and then we give it a name, and then an opening and closing curly bracket. And then in Swift, it's got kind of a weird syntax. You use a case statement like you would with a switch to define the different enumerations. So we need, red was the first. So it goes red, green, blue, purple. Okay, red, green, blue, purple, orange. Okay. That's green, wasn't it? Case blue, case purple, case orange.
Yep.
So this just reads, so like if you get the actual value, which we'll do in a little bit, red will be 0, green will be 1, blue will be 2. So when we go ahead and assign it, it'll be much easier because we actually have these guys lined up. So you won't have to say case 0, case 1. We can actually assign it one of these. All right, so now we have the enumeration. Now we're actually ready to get into the code a little deeper. So what we'll do next is in the main storyboard, we're going to create an event for our slider that's going to be like a value changed event so that when the slider gets moved, we change the number of objects that we're creating. So click on the assistant editor up here, and hey, it figured it out. There really is only one source file, so all right. So then with that guy up, you can do a control drag from the slider control and plop that anywhere after the variable declarations where there's white space. This is going to be an action because this is an event that we're firing. And we'll call this slider changed. That's our event name. The type of object that's getting passed in as a slider, so that gets passed into this function as a parameter, and we can connect that. So that should give you the little handy bullseye guy. If you are on Xcode 8, you'll get this weird looking syntax here with the little underline, little underbar space, and then sender. If you're in Xcode 7, you won't get this little weird underbar thing. That's like it's something new. Okay. So when the slider changes, the first thing that we want to do is update our current, this guy up here, current value. So that's the number of, that's actually what that's going to represent is, that'll be the number of balls, but we're going to have to convert that in our code at some point, but we'll get there. For right now, all we need to do is say self.currentValue is equal to sender, which is our slider, sender dot, sorry, I think it's value. Yep, sender dot value. And then once we have that changed, then we also need to set our timer and do some stuff. Okay. Let's see. I'm at a quandary whether or not to take a break now or dive into this. dive? All right, we're going to do it. We're going to take the plunge. All right. So let's create our method that is actually going to create our animation and fire it off. And I'm going to call this guy send a ball. Beautiful. All right. It's going to take a parameter. Because I hate typing, I'm just going to call it TM for timer. If you have Xcode 7, that'll have to be an NS timer type.
Is there a return type then on it or no?
Nah, this will just be a void. So in here, this is where we're going to calculate the location on the screen to start, and then actually create the object and send it on its way. All right, so what we'll do is we're going to increment. First thing is this X value that we have that's set to 0. As we drop these objects, we want to move across our screen to the right, so it creates kind of like almost like a waterfall pattern. So what we're going to do is increment that. Sorry. So say self.current, not value, current X plus equals 10. So I'll move it 10 points over to the right. So with the screen coordinates, 0, 0 is up here, upper left, and maximum value is in the lower right. All right, so self.current value plus equals 10. Then we want to check and see if our X value is off the screen. So if we've moved all the way to the right side of the screen, then we want to reset it to 0 and move it back to the left. So we can say if we have to convert this to a CG float. We're using core graphics. Current X. So we're going to typecast the value as greater than self.view. So the view is the viewable area of the screen. And there's a variable, a property on the view called bounds. So the bounds is basically the bounding rectangle of the screen. Dot width is the width of the screen. So we're saying if the current X value is beyond the bounds of the screen, then reset it. So that's first.
You don't need self in there again?
No, you don't. I mean, I put it up here. It's not a bad idea to with that. It's not a bad idea actually to have, just because it makes it more descriptive. So you're not wondering, okay, where's current X defined? Like if you're coming into a program as a maintenance programmer or something like that, and you come and you look at the code and you look at it and you see current X, you're like, okay, where is that? And you're looking around trying. If you have self.current X, then you just know it's a member variable and you don't have to go looking around to figure out where it's defined. All right, so at this point we can go ahead and do some fancy stuff with the processing queue, but I'm going to avoid that because its syntax changes between Xcode 7 and 8. So that could get pretty ugly trying to get that right. So let's do this. Let's say we're going to create a rectangle. This is what we're going to use to create our object. When you create a UIView object, so all the objects that we have on our screen, the slider, the segmented control, the label, text fields, all those are derived from a UIView. So UIView is kind of a handy little thing because you can, if you want to create your own special object, you can use a UIView and just draw it to look like whatever you want. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create this guy with a rectangle, tell it where it is located. And that's the one we want. We want the bottom CG rect constructor. The X is going to be our current X. So that will define the starting point of our object. The Y we're going to start just slightly off the top of the screen. So you can actually define a negative value, and that'll start it above the top of the screen. Width will be 20, and height will be 20. All right, so this is going to create our rectangle, and then from that we'll create our view. But before I get there, one thing I want to make sure we do is set our selected color in the view did load. So we have a default color set, which is going to be the first segment. So we'll just say self.current, what did I call it? I thought I called it current color, selected color, right? Dot selected color equals UI color dot red. If you have Xcode 7, this is going to be red color, I'm pretty sure, not just red. So that sets the, because otherwise this guy, we told it we're going to populate this, and then if we try to access this down here when we're making our ball and it's not populated with something, it'll abort the program. Because that's just how Apple does stuff. All right, so we have our rectangle. Now we're going to create our actual view. I'm going to call it ball, cleverly. This will be a CG rect. No, I'm sorry. This will be a UI view. And then with the constructors that pop up, we want the one that takes a rectangle, and then we're going to pass in the rectangle we just made. R, because I hate typing. Very descriptive. I've always been criticized for not doing a very good job of creating variable names, but local variables is usually not so critical. You guys get the idea anyway. All right, so now that will create a square view with a width and height of 20 points, slightly off the screen in the upper left-hand corner, or wherever current X happens to be located, which starts in the upper left. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to take this from just a square, plain Jane UI view, because by default, all UI views when you create them are square or rectangular, depending upon. And my point is they don't have radiuses on the corners; they're pointy. So we're going to make this into a ball. So what we can do is this. We can say ball, which is our view, dot layer, which is that, I mentioned it briefly, I think last time. It's kind of like an invisible sort of layer that resides on top of the view that allows you to kind of shape it. Ball dot layer dot corner radius is equal to 10. So basically the radius of that, if you think of the square square object like this little guy here, the radius will be half of it. So if we set the corner radius to the radius, then that'll make it a perfectly round object. All right. So now we have the basic shape set. We have we need to add color to this guy. So we can say ball dot background color is equal to self dot selected color. So this is the part that if you didn't have selected color set up here, this would crash the app. Okay, so now the next step is something that's really, really, really critical, because if you don't have this line of code, you're never going to see anything, and it's really frustrating. Trust me. Self.view. So the view is the overall frame of the window. Dot add subview. And we're adding the ball. Okay, so that actually creates it visually on the screen. Well, in this case, it'll be slightly off the screen, and we're going to move it onto the screen.
Is it a different code for us again?
Pardon?
Is it different again for us?
Shouldn't be.
Did you get the pop-up for the view?
It's working for mine. It has view spell.
I can't spell. Everything's spelled
You get it?
wrong. Yeah, I can't type.
Yeah, if you guys over here need help, just reference those. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
No, it's fine. You'll be out here all week. Well, except the first week.
Right. Except for the first week, which, as you all know, was an anomaly. All right. So now we're going to actually create the effect of this thing being dropped on the screen. So what we're going to say is UIView. UIView has a static function called animate with duration. And time interval animations. Yeah, the guy we want is actually the top one.
Ours is a little different again.
Yeah, probably just pick the top animate. So your parameters should be the time interval and this, the void pointer, function pointer.
Are we setting time interval to timer?
We're actually not. So this guy actually gets fired off. This is the amount of time it takes the ball to drop. The interval between the ball drops is being set by the timer interval. But the amount of time the ball takes to get to the bottom of the screen we'll just set it to a constant. So we'll say 2.00, which is 2 seconds. And we'll see what that looks like. We may want to change it. For our animations, you want to say opening curly bracket, hit enter. And then that will put the closing curly bracket in there for you. Now what this signifies, this animate with duration, what it does is you basically tell it in the code block that you put in here, this is what I want the ending condition to be. So you start off with the way it is currently, and in the code block here, what you're telling it is the end condition, and then what it does is it takes the time factor that you supply it, and over the course of 2 seconds, it takes it from its start point to the end point that you define there. So our end point is going to be, we want the ball to be down at the bottom of the screen, and then in order to create like a neat little like dropping effect, almost like an arch, we're going to increase the X a little bit too. So it's going to kind of like look like it's actually dropping as opposed to just falling straight down. So that's what we need to do, is define the end condition. So to do that, we're going to say ball dot frame. So the frame is modifiable after the view is created. The frame is, you can think of the frame as the same thing as the bounds, except that the bounds is kind of like it's a read-only once it's been created, whereas frame you can mess with. So gets confusing. CG rect, and this will be our end location where we want the ball to end up. So we can say with the X, we'll say current X plus 5 maybe. All right, so Y in this case is an int. And all right, so I'll just type it out and then we'll talk about it. Int self dot view dot bounds dot height.
Jesus.
All right, so what we're doing is this method takes integer values, and the bounds.height is a float, so we got to convert it to an int. That's what we're doing right there. And there's something weird with it. Okay, wants self in there. All right. And the width is still going to be 20. We could do something funky with it. We could try this. We could shrink it or grow it. But we'll just keep it the same for now. And that's it. So the animate with duration is a really handy core function that Apple supplied that allows you to do all kinds of animations. Like another thing we could do is once they drop, we could have them drop to the bottom and then fade to invisible. That's another thing we could do. But for right now, we'll just have them drop. All right, and I am going to stop the recording so that it doesn't blow up the machine. And we can take a quick break.